TemTem made waves a couple of years back when the early access version launched on PC in January 2020. A Pokémon MMO seemed like a dream come true, and a Switch version would eventually come out. Well, we had to wait 2 years, but the full version of TemTem is now available on Switch as well as other platforms. This now begs the question, is TemTem the Pokémon killer it was butt cracked up to be? Or is TemTem actually doo-doo? Let's get one thing out of the way first. TemTem is very much a Pokémon clone. You start off by getting woken up, a professor lets you choose from 3 Pokémon, and you battle your rival. Except your rival stomps you, and the starter TemTem aren't types you'd expect. Then your journey begins. You walk through the tall grass, battle wild TemTem and trainers, gain experience, level up and learn moves, and you can even catch TemTem in things that are totally different from Pokeballs. Seriously, you won't be playing with any balls in TemTem. At the very least, TemTem will be familiar to Pokemon players, which makes it easily approachable. There are some key changes though. For instance, you send out 2 TemTem in battle at a time. Unlike Monster Sanctuary, where it felt like a traditional RPG with monsters, TemTem more closely resembles double battles in Pokemon. This means synergy with your TemTem is helpful but not necessary, and they can definitely act independent of each other if you want them to. Another change I enjoyed is how stamina works. Certain moves require turns to charge up, so you can't just spam the best attacks right away. But if you don't have enough stamina and launch a powerful attack anyways, you'll hurt yourself in the process due to overexertion. Sort of like when you're constipated. It's a great change on the Pokemon formula where you would simply spam your best move until your PP stops working. Unfortunately, there's several things I didn't like here as well. A side effect of TemTem's MMO nature is that the game rarely runs smoothly. It will repeatedly stutter to accommodate the other tamers running around. Personally, I would have preferred offline to be the default, and then if you go online it's like the wild area in Sword and Shield. Instead, you'll always have others invading your personal space like you're a cute baby at an old folks home. Thankfully, when you get to an area without any players, TemTem runs pretty well. When you're in an area with a lot of other players though, they can easily block an important NPC, causing you to miss a worthwhile conversation. Or even worse, a group of players will be blocking a mandatory battle, so you'll just be walking along and bam! Some rando out of nowhere forces you into a situation you don't want to be in, like a 2B cosplayer at Comic-Con spotted by a sweaty neckbeard who wants a photo. The other players aren't always at fault for TemTem's issues. The game design's just not all that inspired. You basically walk through boring area after boring area with nothing interesting to break it up, avoiding tall grass and doing mandatory tamer battles. While the visuals may seem nice at first, they get real bland after about an hour of seeing the same colors and trees. In fact, I had been accosted numerous times by NPCs I didn't notice, because they were simply washed out in the background. I'm not sure if this is due to the MMO nature of TemTem or just a bug, but whenever one of my TemTem evolved in a battle, the game would completely break. I'd no longer be able to see the battle, and sometimes a TemTem would just randomly show up on its own. I still managed to win the fight because the menus were present, but when it was over, I was presented with this weird image featuring the PlayStation and Xbox logo and a bunch of other random stuff. I also experienced 2 full crashes in my time with TemTem, and while slowdown is an issue on the first island, it does decrease on the second. The first island is quite big, so it can hold a lot more people, while the second is far more manageable. And when you get to the third island, the frame rate takes a constant hit. Overall, I'd say the Switch just can't properly handle TemTem. Maybe if they'd made smaller sections, sure, but once the areas reach a certain size and enough players show up, the performance drops considerably. So it's essentially an MMO where you don't want other people to play it. Another offender is the text size. I played in handheld mode, and reading the level of an opponent's TemTem is rough, same with seeing your quest. There is an option to increase the font size. I used it, and I'm not sure anything really changed. So if you're bothered by small font size, TemTem is another one to add to the list of games that may require a magnifying glass. Then again, you're viewing the same footage I am, so if you're watching this review on your Switch and it seems fine, you won't have an issue. As for the adventure in TemTem, it plays out just like a Pokemon game. You travel through the world, catch TemTem, battle wild tamers, and defeat gyms. Except they're called dojos here. Very different. TemTem's also more difficult. Getting one-hit KOs against trainers is rare, so switching in and out of battles is key. Thankfully, your TemTem are likely to survive several hits, so it's not a simple case of sending in someone to take a hit. Even a lower level TemTem can hold its own against someone 5, 6, 7, or even more levels above them. I'd even go so far as to say that TemTem is more balanced than Pokemon. A drawback about the adventure is that routes go on for way too long and money isn't always easy to come by in the beginning, so buying a smoke bomb, which lets you automatically return to the last Pokemon Center, is absolutely vital. What really sucks about TemTem is the pacing, specifically when it comes to evolving. I spent hours leveling my first TemTem team, but everybody stayed the same. That's because TemTem don't evolve at a set level, they evolve after achieving a certain number of levels. For example, a TemTem doesn't evolve at level 18. It evolves after gaining 18 levels after catching it. So if you catch a TemTem at level 1010, it might not evolve until level 28. But if you were to catch that same TemTem at level 50, it might not evolve until 68. It's a change from the Pokemon formula that makes things worse. It discourages changing your team unless you go through the hassle of breeding TemTem and starting every single one you catch from level 1. Using my starter as an example, it takes 29 levels to evolve. I was on my way to the 3rd gym before that happened. And for it to evolve again, I'd need to go another 23 levels. A huge part of the fun of monster games is what they turn into. TemTem turns something that should be fun into a chore. Did I say chore? I meant bore. Did I say bore? I meant snore. Did I say snore? I meant floor. Next, let me get to the TemTem themselves. The names overall are underwhelming, but most of the designs are enjoyable and the battle animations are great. I know between Pokemon, Digimon, and all the other monster taming games out there, it's hard to create something original. I'm just not excited to send a Pukey or a two-way into battle. Pagapic, meanwhile, is a great name, though I don't think it holds a candle to Lechonk. Basically, when you see the TemTem in action, it's very apparent this is a Pokemon clone. They saw how successful the formula was and decided to just do that. Because of how much they copied, TemTem lacks a lot of that originality I wanted to see. In something like Nexomon, even though it also copied a lot of Pokemon's traits, it still had a charm and wittiness about it. If it wasn't for the MMO aspect of TemTem, I doubt it would have received a fraction of the attention it did, because it is for the most part a lesser Pokemon game. Okay, I just read back what I'd written and realized I'm getting a little too harsh here. What I'm trying to get at is that TemTem isn't memorable enough. There was never that one moment I can clearly point to where I was super excited to have played it. My life for a full week was TemTem, and I never woke up super stoked to play it. I didn't dread it though, it just felt like I was going through the motions. And as I'm making this video, all I can remember is the long boring routes and how I wish they'd spent less time making it an MMO and more time making it fun. To their credit, the writing can be amusing at times. It's nowhere near as hilarious as Nexomon Extinction, and a lot of it is just nonsensical babble, but I'll admit to smiling every once in a while. What sucks is that a lot of characters have nothing to say. While some have side quests to give, most will just have long text strings that don't really go anywhere. That's another issue with TemTem. It's not afraid to waste your time. A great example is aboard the airship. The first time you're on it, you get summoned by the captain. The captain needs charts to land properly, so you go to the navigator who's hungover. They need a coffee. So you find the kitchen. The head chef says they're busy, so you go to the sous chef. The sous chef hands you the coffee. You go back to the navigator, get the charts, and hand them to the captain. This is a mandatory quest, and nothing interesting happens in between. It's obvious they were going for an SS Anne vibe with this part of the game, except exploring the ship isn't fun. You don't have a cool rival battle at the end, and you don't get to rub any adult's shoulders as a 10-year-old. Super disappointing. I wanted to touch some old people and make them feel good with my small hands. To avoid spoilers, I won't dive into the story, I'm not Donkey. I'll just say that something interesting happens at some point. At first I was intrigued, but in practice the change was more harmful than helpful. I know I'm being vague because it is unexpected, it's simply unfortunate that when they tried something new it wasn't for the better. I'll be honest, after defeating the 3rd dojo I lost interest in TemTem. The game threw all of these different boring fetch quests at me when all I wanted to do was advance the story. Between backtracking and having to grind to keep up with other tamers, I couldn't justify wasting more hours here. So I guess the good news is that if you like TemTem, it's a long adventure. But the bad news is that if you don't like TemTem, it's a long adventure that, again, isn't afraid to waste your time. Because I was dropped on my head one too many times as a baby though, I decided to keep going for a few more hours. It was just the same old, same old. The quest became even more tedious, forcing me to run back and forth multiple times to the same locations. Wild battles were still always a nuisance, and the battles were still repetitive, while the levels of other TemTem would be anywhere from 20 below to 10 up. Ultimately, I did not finish TemTem, nor will I be going back to finish it. Despite that, overall, as a Pokemon clone, TemTem is fine. The battling is an improvement in most areas, and the rest of the game provides everything a clone needs. Except a belly button. Everyone knows a person without a belly button as a clone. As a Pokemon MMO though, TemTem's extremely disappointing. The MMO aspect is unnecessary and more of an annoyance than an asset. Other aspects like the bland game and level design hold TemTem back, but if you're looking for something to hold you over until Scarlet and Violet, and you've already played Monster Sanctuary and Exomon Extinction, Monster Hunter Stories 2, and Legends Arceus, this may scratch that itch until you start bleeding. My final verdict is placing TemTem in the C tier for Pokemon clones. Because TemTem is technically more than 2 years old at this point, it's based off of the Pokemon formula prior to Legends Arceus. Going back to random encounters in confined areas just wasn't fun for me, so if you've never played Legends Arceus, definitely get that before TemTem.